It was a simple, straightforward question, and it deserved a simple, straightforward answer. John Montero thought to himself, "How long have you been sleeping with Aaron?" He asked his wife, Tracy, in a near whisper as she walked into the dark kitchen, only for him to surprise her by turning on the light. Tracy didn't respond, realizing halfway through her step that John likely knew far more than she had assumed. She knew it would be foolish she had caught in yet another lie. "Around 5 years," she whispered, her gaze fixed on the table. "And everyone at the university knows about it." "Yes," she whispered again. "Well, damn. You've been sleeping with this guy for 5 years, and everyone knows about it except your dumbass husband. I guess that's what I get for trusting you so completely. Is there anyone else I should know about, you tramp?" Shock registered on Tracy's face. John had never spoken an unkind word to her before, not even during their arguments. She saw the fury in his eyes and felt grateful that John was not a cruel man. Tracy's thoughts raced in all directions. When and how had John found out about Aaron? Could he have been at the awards dinner? To Tracy, it made no sense, as John had never attended any of the formal university award dinners before. Yet the timing of this confrontation felt too coincidental. Still, nothing at the awards dinner could have possibly revealed their affair, she thought. John had been late to the awards dinner. Tracy had told him not to worry about attending since it was just a dinner to honor various staff members from the university's academic departments. Tracy worked as an administrator in the English department, which comprised 5 professors, a dean, a deputy dean, an administrator, and a secretary. She had been with the department for 15 years, and this year marked her anniversary. On Fridays, her husband usually worked about an hour later than usual, so she assumed he likely wouldn't even think about attending the event. For heaven's sake, he hadn't attended any other formal dinners in the past 14 years, so she didn't think he would agree to go this time, even if she was receiving a pin to mark her milestone. Truthfully, she didn't want him there, but she had told him about the dinner to avoid being accused of keeping him out of the loop. John hadn't promised to attend the event, but he knew he was planning to go to honor his wife's milestone. He thought she would greatly enjoy the surprise. This is what you do for the love of your life. He thought to himself, traffic had delayed him a little, and he arrived at the dinner about 10 minutes late. Most people were already standing in line at the buffet or seated at their tables, grouped mainly by department. John looked for where Tracy was sitting and spotted her at a table for 15, occupied by members of the English department and a few spouses. He noticed that Tracy was sitting between the deputy dean, Jason Peterson, and Professor Aaron McClary. Seeing there were no empty seats at the table, John went through the buffet line and chose a seat at the back of the room, deciding he would find his wife and congratulate her after she received her award. As John expected, the program was tedious, but they finally got to the English department. When his wife's name was announced, she stood and went to receive her award from the dean, Dr. Stephen Engelbert. As she walked up to the podium, John couldn't help but feel proud of her. She looked 10 years younger than her 46 years. Despite having 2 children, she weighed only a few kilograms more than she had when they married, and her dark chestnut shoulder-length hair complemented her fair, almost alabaster skin. After she received her award and headed back to her table, John stood and moved forward to intercept her and surprise her with his congratulations. She returned to her table before he reached her, and as she approached, John noticed Aaron stand, apparently to congratulate her as well. Aaron had always seemed like a pleasant enough guy in the few times John had met him over the years, so he thought little of it until Tracy invaded Aaron's personal space. She gently placed her hands on Aaron's forearms and then softly kissed him on the lips. John froze in his tracks, his eyes widening in shock. No one at the table seemed to pay any attention, perhaps because at first glance it didn't seem overly demonstrative. But to John, it spoke volumes. This simple act was so intimate and familiar, as if it were something shared by a husband and wife, or, apparently, a woman and her longtime lover. John suddenly felt nausea and a churning in his stomach. He immediately turned around, left the hall, found a bathroom, and emptied the contents of his stomach. After composing himself, he drove home, his mind alternating between deep thought and complete blankness during the 20-minute drive. It was a little after 9 when John arrived home, giving him about 2 hours to make some plans. Tracy was expected to return home around 11, as she always did after events like this. John realized that her punctuality was probably one of the reasons he had trusted her so much, and one of the reasons she had successfully hidden her affair. Don't do anything out of the ordinary, and your clueless husband won't suspect a thing, John thought grimly. Thinking about things from this perspective helped John understand a few more details. He realized that every time Tracy came home after her evening outings, she would quickly greet him and head upstairs to take a shower, saying she needed to wash away the day, as she liked to call it. She would then come back downstairs, freshly showered and lightly scented with her new perfume. He had never put two and two together to realize that she was likely masking the scent of sex on her body. Naturally, they never had sex on those nights, as Tracy always claimed she was too tired. At the very least, she wasn't sharing any careless seconds with him, he thought bitterly. Around 10:55, John took a bottle of red wine out of the fridge and placed 2 glasses on the kitchen table. He walked into the living room, turned on a light in the TV, and then returned to the dimly lit kitchen to sit down. 10 minutes later, Tracy pulled her car into the garage and entered the kitchen. She was about to call for her husband, and the kitchen light suddenly turned on. John wasn't in his study. He was in the kitchen. Tracy murmured. John looked as if he'd just bitten into a lemon. He gestured toward the other wine glass and took a sip from his own. "Why?" John croaked. "I love you with all my heart and thought you loved me. We raised 2 wonderful children together. What happened to the vow, till death do us part? I'm sorry, John. It just happened. I know it sounds like a lame excuse, but it's true. When he came here, we became friends. Then it turned into something more, and as time went on, the dean and eventually others found out about it. The dean just asked us to show respect for the university, and after a while, it became normal. I became his work wife in every sense. Then we just carved out a little extra time whenever we could. You trusted me completely, and that made things easier for us. Well, it was so foolish of me to trust the woman I love. I apologize for that," John said sarcastically. "And I suppose my occasional trips helped you too." Tracy blushed and lowered her eyes. John got his answer. "I'm in love with 2 men. Maybe you think that's impossible, but it's true. I love you both, and I've done everything I can to never hurt you. You've never lacked love from me, neither emotionally nor physically. I've always been there for you," Tracy exclaimed plaintively, her eyes filling with tears. "At least until recently," John replied. "When did he manage to overtake me?" "In the last few months, you started to drift away emotionally, and it's been an eternity since you initiated intimacy. You respond when I want it, but you don't initiate, and when we make love, I don't feel the same intensity anymore. Are you thinking about him? Aaron has been going through a rough time with his wife lately, and maybe I got a little too caught up in his problems. So Mr. Second Husband is also married, and he was having a rough time with his first wife. Rough times? I assume she doesn't know about his affair. As far as we knew, neither of you knew about the affair. We were so careful. We didn't want to hurt either of you." "No," John shouted. "You were careful because you didn't want to get caught. At the very least, you knew what would happen if you were." "How did you catch us?" Tracy asked quietly, trying to change something for the future. John asked mockingly, "What the hell?" "As if it matters now. I didn't catch you. You gave yourselves away." Tracy's eyes widened in shock. "What?" "I was about 10 minutes late to the awards banquet. I had to sit in the back. I saw the kiss." "The kiss? That little kiss? It was nothing." "How could you have figured anything out from that kiss?" she asked, "because it wasn't demonstrative. It was just a small, intimate kiss and touch, exactly like the ones we used to share thousands of times in the past, but not recently," John said. "Maybe I was the only one in the room who noticed it." Tracy blushed and hesitated. She decided not to respond. "Why did you come to the award ceremony?" she finally asked. "Because I saw us drifting apart, and I was trying to be there for you, to maybe bring us back together again." "Talk about a mistake. I'm sorry, John. I never meant to hurt you. How can we come to some kind of agreement to move forward?" Tracy asked. "Move forward? Seriously?" John said in a tone of a man utterly shocked. On Monday morning. The first thing I'll do is call a lawyer." "What?" "I'm not sure I want a divorce." "What?" "If you're not sure you want a divorce, that's your problem." "Because I'm absolutely sure I do," John said. "You can't love 2 men when you've sworn vows to me. And I'm certainly not going to be husband number 2. Maybe we just need to slow down a bit, John. I still love you, but I also love someone else." "I don't understand why we need to rush into a divorce," Tracy said, trying to look as sincere as possible. "I don't understand why you're making me the bad guy here." "Well, I'm certainly not the worst guy in this situation. I'm not the one who's been having an affair for 5 damn years." John stood up and poured his nearly full glass of wine into the kitchen sink. He trudged upstairs to the bedroom. Tracy went to the living room and made a phone call. "He knows," she said quietly into her iPhone. "He's talking about divorce." She listened carefully to the response on the other end of the line. "No, I have no idea. I didn't plan for this to happen right now," she replied to a question. "Yes, I love you too." Tracy hung up and sat in the living room, sipping wine and barely paying attention to what was playing on the big screen. She went back to the kitchen for a second glass and repeated the process. She truly loved Aaron, and though she didn't necessarily love John the way she had at the beginning, she believed she still had strong feelings for him. She thought about John's words that she had recently been pulling away from him and buried her head in her hands. Looking back, she realized John was probably right. In recent weeks, she had spent more time connecting with Aaron. Over the past year, she and Aaron had discussed the idea of marriage several times, and in recent months, Aaron and his wife of 17 years have been facing difficulties, although Aaron assured her he didn't think his wife suspected their affair. John was in the bedroom when Tracy went upstairs. She noticed that the door to their elder daughter's room was closed and assumed John was sleeping there. Their eldest daughter was in her penultimate year at the University of Michigan, while their youngest was a freshman at Ball State. Tracy thought that having the kids away at college was probably a good thing for the moment. John was mowing the lawn under the morning spring sun when Tracy finally woke up. She stepped out onto the back porch and watched him for a while. When he looked up at her, she gestured for him to come inside. He shook his head firmly and continued mowing. After standing on the porch for a couple of minutes, hands on her hips, Tracy got into her car and drove off. John assumed she was heading to the grocery store, as she usually did on Saturdays, but he wasn't sure, and frankly, he didn't care. He had too much on his mind. As soon as Tracy was out of sight, John went into the house to call their daughters and explain the situation. Both were shocked by his statement, but John explained that he had witnessed a kiss and that Tracy had confessed to her infidelity. You saw them kiss, and then Mom just admitted she'd been sleeping with this guy, asked their elder daughter, Katie. It wasn't just the kiss, it was the way they kissed, like they'd been doing it for years. There was a familiar intimacy, the kind you see between a husband and wife. It broke my heart. I'm so sorry, Dad. I really am, Katie said. Tracy and John usually went out for dinner on Saturday evenings, but John had already cleaned up and left by the time Tracy returned from the store. She wasn't particularly surprised when he didn't come back for dinner, but she knew it was unlike him to be rude and not call. Finally, around 10:30, he came into the house, muttered something in Tracy's direction, and went upstairs to sleep in their elder daughter's room again. John woke up to the smell of coffee brewing in the kitchen. Staggering downstairs with a hangover and bloodshot eyes, he poured himself a cup. Tracy was sitting at her end of the kitchen table and said nothing until John dropped into a chair. "How about we start acting like two adults?" Tracy asked, her tone somewhat smug. "I haven't been very good at that in the last few weeks, have I?" John replied just as sarcastically, "All right, John. We've talked about this already. I'm sorry for how things turned out, but I still love you. I love you both. Let's figure out how we can make this work for both of us." "We can't make it work for both of us," John replied, "because it doesn't work for me at all. You swore before God and everyone else that we'd be faithful to each other forever. You broke those vows, those sacred promises. Not to mention you broke my damn heart. You and your lover need to figure something out. I'm leaving this place. Can you just throw away 22 years of marriage like that?" Tracy shouted, "I made a mistake. It was a mistake." "No, once might have been a mistake," John said. "This went on for years. You lived it. You wanted it. You made your choice. The choice wasn't mine. Now you can go to him and devote all your time to him. But I don't want that, John," she said. "I love you both. I really do. Give me some time to figure this out, for all of us." "All of us," John shouted. "There is no all of us in this equation, and there sure as hell isn't any us." John turned and walked away, heading to the shower in the master bathroom. When he came out and returned to the kitchen, Tracy was gone. She had left a note taped to the bathroom door, asking him not to do anything rash until they could talk again. She's probably having sex with that idiot. John thought to himself. Tracy had, in fact, gone to Aaron, but there was nothing sexual between them. "I think this means our plans just changed," Aaron said. "I really wasn't ready for this right now." "Aaron," Tracy admitted. "I know we've talked about it, and I really do want this, but I still love him, and I wasn't ready to let him go yet. We have a history, kids. I've loved him for almost 25 years, and you don't just get rid of that so easily." John was admitting the same thing to himself at home. Although he wasn't usually very emotional, he couldn't hold back the tears that quickly ran down his cheeks. He downed a shot of Don Julio tequila, finding some comfort in the warmth spreading through his stomach that he sat at the kitchen table, making a to-do list of tasks he needed to handle personally over the next few days. He smiled grimly to himself, realizing that not having the kids around made his plans a bit easier. "Dan," he muttered. On Monday morning, John asked his boss for some personal time. His boss, Stan, had known John for over 15 years, and the only other time John had requested personal time off was when his parents passed away. Stan knew something was wrong in John's life. Of course, the fact that John looked like he hadn't slept in days might have been another clue. "Taking time off isn't a problem," Stan said. "Is there anything I can do to help?" John hesitated but eventually gave in and told Stan his story. "Dan, I'm really sorry, John. I've been married about as long as you have, so I don't have any great advice for you, except to ask if you considered all the options including reconciliation. Have you asked yourself if you'd be better off with her or without her?" "I know it sounds cliche, but I've asked myself the question at least 100 times, Stan, and I always get the same answer. Essentially, she's had a second husband for 5 years, and they've even discussed her leaving me for him. I can't share her with anyone, and I can't tolerate such disrespect. I love her and hate her at the same time. I'll never be able to trust her again. She's a lying cheat, Stan. And I know I don't deserve a lying cheat. Tracy fought against the divorce, but was smart enough to start making alternative plans with Aaron. 6 months later, John, for the first time in nearly 25 years, was a free man. Deep down, he knew he still had some lingering love for Tracy, but he couldn't share his wife. He also knew that if he hadn't stumbled upon Tracy's betrayal, he might have eventually had to come to terms with it, and not necessarily from a position of strength. The couple split their finances evenly and agreed to sell the house. The children, of course, were devastated by the divorce but understood there was nothing they could do to change John's mind. Only Tracy's parents seemed to have a problem with the divorce, and throughout the process they repeatedly begged John to do more to try to save the marriage. John really loved his in-laws on his wife's side and tried to gently persuade them. She says she loves us both. I'm not built that way, so I made the choice for her, John said. While the divorce process was going through the courts, John struggled with the idea of whether or not to tell Aaron's wife about her husband's long-term infidelity. He knew that if he did, it would come across as an act of revenge, but he also felt strongly that she deserved to know rather than being left in the dark. On the date his divorce was finalized, John called Aaron's wife and broke her heart. The McClorys were about 5 years younger than the Monteros, and their 2 children were 15 and 12 years old. John was especially concerned about how this revelation would affect the McClorys' children. I'm truly sorry to deliver bad news, but I couldn't, in good conscience, keep this from you. I feel like I was lying to you too, John told Aaron's wife, Letty. It took just 1 day for John to receive a venomous tirade from his newly minted ex-wife. Wow. I bet you feel like a real man, destroying Aaron's marriage like that, she yelled at him over the phone. Why on earth do you think I would participate in your deception of this innocent woman, you adulteress? John fired back. If you two love each other so much, own up to it and be honest with this woman. She never did anything to hurt you, you homewrecker. To John's surprise, Tracy fell silent on the other end of the line. He heard someone mutter goodbye. While John was confident in his abilities in bed, Tracy had been his only romantic success in his first 47 years of life, and he hadn't dated anyone in nearly 25 years. He was fully aware that his sex life would never be the same again. However, what John didn't anticipate was the sheer number of single women over 40, given that divorce rates had exceeded 50%. Word spread quickly at John's workplace that he was now a free man, and single women aged 25 to 65 made sure that John, who had always kept himself in good shape, knew they were available. On the rare occasions when John visited his favorite spot, he never lacked company. It took time, but John occasionally indulged in the abundance of riches. Over time, the hole in John's heart began to heal, and life settled into a steadier rhythm. The McClare divorce wasn't as smooth as the Montero one, but 18 months later, Tracy and Aaron got married. John's 2 children didn't have warm feelings toward Aaron and mostly stayed with John when they were home, while Aaron's children only stayed with him and his new wife on weekends. Tracy tried her best but never managed to truly bond with Aaron's kids. Over time, this became less of an issue for the couple. While Tracy enjoyed being Aaron's work wife, her enthusiasm for being his full-time wife seemed to wane after a few months. Tracy wasn't sure if the problem was that she missed John, had overestimated her feelings for Aaron, or simply needed the variety of 2 men. Regardless of the reason, the couple divorced 3 years later. At 52, John was still in great shape, though streaks of gray had started to appear in his dark chestnut hair. He had no trouble attracting female company and went on 1 or 2 dates a week. One evening, after a long day at work, he stopped by his favorite diner for a sandwich and a couple of drinks. He was sitting at the bar, just starting to eat his sandwich, when he heard a familiar voice behind him. "Hello, stranger. Mind if I sit here?" John didn't need to turn around to recognize the voice of his ex-wife. He swallowed hard. "What'll you have to drink, Tracy?" he asked, gesturing for her to take a seat the usual John. "I know you hadn't forgotten. Cal, a glass of Chablis for the lady, please. On my tab." As the bartender served the wine, John looked at his ex-wife for the first time in nearly 5 years. Her blonde hair was a little longer, her waist about 2 inches wider, and fine lines had appeared at the corners of her eyes, but she was still an incredibly attractive woman, John had to admit. "How about we call a truce for Katie's wedding, John?" Tracy asked. "I didn't realize we were at war," John replied. "Up until a minute ago, you hadn't said a single word to me since the divorce," Tracy said. "You don't show up at family events. You didn't even come to Katie's engagement party. Our eldest daughter is getting married next year, and you need to be there. It's important to her, John. If it's important to Katie, then it's important to me. I'll be there and do everything I can for her." You make the plans and I'll cover the expenses. Tracy gave John a sad smile. I remember when you used to feel that way about me, John. I don't understand how I could have been so foolish to take your love for granted. John extended his right hand, and Tracy placed her left hand in his. 2 hours later, before leaving the bar, Tracy took John's mobile number. The two agreed to do everything they could to make Katie's wedding as memorable as possible. 3 weeks later, John met with Katie and his ex-wife for a wedding planning lunch. The meeting went well, and as John was about to head back to work, he almost absent-mindedly invited Tracy to dinner the following Friday evening. Tracy beamed, while Katie looked more than a little surprised, raising her eyebrows as she glanced at her father. Tracy's take on the classic little black dress caught John off guard when she opened the door that Friday evening. "Wow, very nice, Mrs. McCleary," John mumbled. Tracy's smile quickly shifted to an expression of guilt. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean for it to come out that way," John said. "I'm sorry too. I let you down." "Damn it, I let myself down," Tracy added. They had dinner at one of the city's best Italian restaurants and then viewed artwork at a local gallery. The two mostly talked about their children and what each of them had been up to since the divorce. Tracy shared with John that after her divorce from Aaron, she had transitioned to the university's business faculty, which after 20 years with the English department felt like divorcing a large family. "When I do something stupid, I go all out," she admitted sheepishly. They both enjoyed the evening, and when John walked Tracy to her door, she invited him in for a drink. He politely declined, saying, "Maybe next time." The comment didn't escape Tracy, who flashed a wide smile. On their third date, Tracy managed to lure John into her bed. She discovered a more experienced, more assertive John who had picked up a few new tricks. She was overwhelmed by waves of pleasure as John skillfully used his touch to heighten the moment. They shared an intimate connection, reaching their peak together in perfect harmony. "What on earth was I thinking when I gave this up?" Tracy muttered, cooling down with pleasure. John realized she was asking herself a rhetorical question and had the tact not to respond. John and Tracy went on 2 more dates over the next few months, both of which ended with them in bed. While John saw the evenings as nothing more than casual dates with a beautiful old friend, he could tell that Tracy was beginning to take the dates far more seriously. Katie confirmed this during their next lunch together. "You do realize Mom thinks you two have a chance of getting back together, don't you?" Katie asked pointedly as they sat in the restaurant. "She's as giddy as a schoolgirl. Your marital visits have her convinced you really care about her, but she knows I'm still seeing other women. I've told her that multiple times. I've never lied to your mother, not then and not now. She's a beautiful and sexy woman. I have no problem taking a sexy woman to bed. I'm a healthy man." "Okay, Dad, I get it. But this is the same woman who thought she could have 2 husbands and that you'd be okay with it. She's already shown she might not always have the clearest perspective on her romantic relationships." Message received, "Sweetheart, I'm backing off." Tracy hinted several times that she would be asked out over the next few months, but John kept his promise to Kathy, partly because he had found the woman he wanted to spend the rest of his life with. Truthfully, she had found him. One Saturday, he sprawled onto the floor of a local supermarket after she accidentally hit him with her shopping cart. "What the?" John yelled as he hit the ground in the store after being struck by the cart. Looking up, John saw a tall, slender blonde in her early 50s, her hand covering her mouth as she stared down at him. "Oh my God, I'm so sorry," the angular blonde said. "I was looking for some saffron while pushing my cart and wasn't watching where I was going." John practically sprang to his feet. "Hey, it's no big deal. No harm done," he nearly shouted. "I'm fine." The woman's green eyes filled with tears as he spoke. Without thinking, John glanced at her left hand to check for a ring. He smiled to himself when he saw her fingers were bare. Some guys will do anything to meet a beautiful woman. On one of them. "I admit I'm shameless," John said. She wiped her green eyes with her sleeve and came back, smiling broadly. "Hello, shameless. I'm Rhonda. Actually, Rhonda Shires." Rhonda turned out to be a 50-year-old woman who had divorced her husband 10 years ago due to his infidelity. She had dated casually since then, but hadn't had any serious relationships after the divorce. Despite feeling awkward after meeting John, she quickly admitted to herself that this might have been the best thing to happen to her in a long time. "He's handsome," she thought to herself as John sprang to his feet. A week later, John and Rhonda went on their first date. They had planned to have dinner and see a movie, but the two became so engrossed in conversation that they skipped the movie altogether and went to a quiet bar for drinks, dessert, and more conversation. That first date was followed by half a dozen more, and by the fourth, the couple was deeply engaged in each other. Rhonda was completely overwhelmed when John brought her to half a dozen orgasms, leaving her incoherently shouting during their lovemaking, "Unless this guy is Jack the Ripper, why would some woman let him go free?" Rhonda wondered as she fell asleep in John's arms. 3 months later, John asked Rhonda to accompany him to Katie's wedding. Tracy admitted to Katie that she had hoped John would take her instead. The wedding went off without a hitch. The bride was stunning, and both her parents were incredibly proud of her. Sitting at the family table with Rhonda's godparents, Tracy, KT, and Robert and Sil Morton, John was the perfect host, ensuring the evening was filled with conversation, laughter, and flowing champagne. He also made sure to dance with all three women at the table several times throughout the evening. It was late when John and Rhonda, as usual hand in hand, left the dance floor. Rhonda excused herself and went to the restroom. Before leaving, she leaned in close to John, whispered something in his ear, brushed her hand against his cheek, and gave him a quick kiss on the lips. Rhonda's eyes sparkled as she walked away, and Tracy noticed that John's eyes were equally bright when he sat back down. "I really hate to say this, but you need to put a ring on that woman's finger, John," Tracy said, as the Mortons' longtime family friends looked on with knowing smiles. "Once a wise old acquaintance told me that the devil is in the details. Love isn't just about kisses hot enough to melt steel. It's in the kind, tender touches. It's in the light brush of fingers and the gentle caresses. A few months ago, when we went on a few dates, I thought I had a chance to win you back. But after thinking it over, I realized that we never touch each other as tenderly as we did when we were married. That's when I understood that our relationship would never be special again. But watching you with Rhonda, I finally see what my friend meant, the light touches, the gentle, intimate kiss. She loves you, John, and you love her. Put a ring on her finger, John, and ride off into the sunset with her. Take my best wishes, and everyone else's too." When Tracy finished speaking, Robert filled their champagne glasses to John and Rhonda. "May they ride off into the sunset," he proclaimed in a toast that as Rhonda returned to the table, John stood and kissed her on the lips. "If you'll allow me, I'll be so bold," he said loudly enough for everyone at the table to hear. "I'd like to invite the future Mrs. Montero to the next dance." Thanks to everyone who took the time to listen to today's stories. If you enjoyed it, please consider liking and subscribing if you haven't already. Feel free to share your thoughts on the events in the comments below. Take care.